Alright guys, ready for today's game. It's a really nice one. But before we start, I just want to ask you guys something. I'm thinking about actually focusing Chess Bootcamp rather than just being random videos on whatever kind of happens when I play, but really focusing in on the climbing the rating ladder. So maybe to have playlists for all games against 600 players, 700, 800, 900, 1000, 1100 and so on. So that if you are in the 600 to 699 bracket, then you can just focus on those games and we'll really try and drill into what players in that bracket, the typical mistakes they make and what they need to be focusing on, rather than, if you're 600, seeing games against 1400s may not be quite so immediately practicable for you. So please let me know in the comments if you think that would be a good idea. But anyway, today we've got a game against a 1300, and this is there's some really nice nuances in this that I think you'll appreciate. So I've got the black pieces, and my opponent starts with e4. I play e6, the French defence, and we have d4 and d5. So normal opening for the French. And we go into the French advance now with e5. Sometimes white might capture on d5, and we're going to the exchange variation, which is a bit more open. But this is the advance. I'm pretty comfortable with this. And c5 now is the normal response. This is your first pawn break, attacking a central pawn with a wing pawn. Now we have knight comes out and I simply capture. So now I have the central pawn majority, 2 against 1, and development is fairly equal right now. We've both got one piece out into the board after knight to c6, and now c3, defending the knight, also possibly opening up a diagonal for the queen to come out. And now I play f6. Now this was actually my only mistake in the game because there's a hanging pawn here that I missed. No real excuse for that. So anyway, I play f6 and we have the bishop comes out, light square bishop comes out to pin the knight. I break the pin with my bishop and white castles. So right now white is actually ahead in development after this move because he's got 2 development progress points for castling and 2 pieces out. So white's on 4 points and I'm on 2 right now. So I capture the pawn now on e5 with my pawn, opening up the f-file. So the idea generally will be to castle kingside and get the rook onto the semi-open f-file. But I'm also not building up this very nice pawn majority in the center. So I've got good control now over this part of the board. Now we have an exchange of knights, and again I capture inwards. So look, I've now got 4 pawns on these 3 files compared to white's single pawn. And obviously the bishop's under attack, so the bishop falls back. Now knight to f6, so I'm preparing to castle. Bishop comes out to pin, bishop breaks the pin. Bishop captures, bishop captures. And now queen comes out with check. Now I think this was where my opponent went wrong in this game. So first of all, they've not completed development with the minor pieces. This knight's still in the box and this rook is unable to join the proceedings right now. Plus you have to say, is this an attack with teeth? Yeah, it's stopping me from castling for the moment. So I can't castle out of check. However, is this a real threat? Because I mean, I simply here play g6 with tempo, and now the queen has to move. Now, I was expecting the queen to come to h6, which indeed she does, and now I have, again, I can't castle, but I'm in a fairly comfortable position. My king is behind a bunch of pawns here, so what I decided to do is play my queen to e7, and then I've got options. I can put my bishop there and hit the queen. The queen then can't go on any of these squares. That might be an idea. I could even put my queen to g7 and propose a trade, which is probably unnecessary. And now f4. Now, at this point, I spy a tactic. which could potentially win white's rook. So we've just said that, say I play bishop g7, all right? Queen can't go here because of the pawn, can't go here because my queen will take, has to go to this square, okay? So bishop there, queen has to go to h3, right? Now, if pawn takes pawn and rook takes pawn, can you see the issue? The rook's on here, queen's on h3, right? And now all I have to do is move this pawn forward, and we have a discovered attack on the queen, and the pawn is attacking the rook. Okay, does that make sense? So I'll show you, because it works out. So bishop g7, queen h3 is forced. Now I take. Now here, you can see it more clearly, right? If rook takes, then e5 is a double attack. I've got a pawn on here attacking the rook, and this bishop will be attacking the queen. Okay, now white does decide to capture, and now I play e5. Okay, so this causes my opponent to stop and think for a little while and see what kind of move they can find. So one idea that I looked at was, what if they play bishop takes c6? Okay, bishop takes c6 means that this bishop would then be pinned and can't capture the queen. So I think that might have been a reasonable move. There's no real checks. I mean, rook f8 is pointless. So what would you play as white in this situation, trying to save material? Well, the move that white played, which I think is pretty good, is rook to g4. So A, it gets the rook out of the pawn attack, and then B, it blocks the bishop's attack on the queen. So now I have the option of bishop takes rook, queen takes, so I've won the exchange. However, if I do that, bishop takes rook, queen takes, yeah, I've got an issue of potentially getting my king and my rook forked as well. But I would there have queen c5 check on the king. But here I decide not to grab the rook. Okay, because I feel like, okay, the rook has actually just pinned itself there. And what that means is that I'm not obliged to capture it right now. If I capture, queen recaptures, right? So I've won the exchange. That's good. That's a good thing. That might put me in a very strong position. However, winning the game is better than winning material. So I now figure that I actually have a very strong case to checkmate white's king, which to me is better than trading off material on the board. Okay, so my thought is, if I castle, I get the rook onto the open file, which is what I do next, yeah? And then I've got ideas of maybe check the king, or even just drop the queen onto the f-file and threaten mate here. Okay, this is completely forcing. This is a bigger problem for white than this. So I think a lot of beginners will go, oh look, free material or free exchange, and just automatically do it, and sometimes miss the fact that there's something better on the table. And in this case, the threat of mate down here, so queen on either of these squares would actually be checkmate. Yeah, this is more forcing. Plus, you get to keep the tension of the pinned rook. You know, that's yours. It's like a game show. You know, you've won that. You can't lose that. You know, do you want to play on for the next prize? Right. This is a prize you've already won. Okay, unless the rook can somehow move with check, which it can't, then it's stuck there, or else Her Majesty will perish. Okay, so what white now does is grab the pawn on c6, attacking my rook. Now here again, a beginner would go, oh no, my rook, probably automatically capture the bishop. And what have we won then? We've won a bishop for a pawn, and the pin is gone. Yeah? Also, I still have the threat of mate. okay, which is better, you know, for me than losing a rook. I don't mind losing a rook. So I play queen to f6. Okay, this is threatening mate in 1. And now white must respond. Capturing the rook would just be the end of the game. Okay, so what can white do? How can white prevent mate here? I think one idea would have been to develop the belated knight, which white should have done by this point, instead of maybe bringing out the queen with a half-hearted attack. So I think that's probably perfectly good. I mean, I've still got queen here, force the king away. And then if I want, you know, I could still grab the rook, or I could still grab the bishop for free. You know, the option's still there. What white actually plays here is g3. So covering this square, but covering it with the queen rather than the rook. I definitely think that developing this knight and actually covering that square with this rook would have been preferable. Actually, I didn't see that one at the time. Okay, but now black can win by force. So can you see the sequence of a forced checkmate in 3 moves? Okay, I'm not concerned about this rook. I'm not even really concerned about these guys, or this bishop attack here. I'm concerned about winning. So the first move is queen f2. Now, a lot of people forget this kind of stopping on the 7th rank, sometimes with a check, forcing the king to move, okay? There is only one legal move here. King has to go back to h1. And now the next move, queen e1, check. Right? White is in check and has to respond. There are only 2 possible moves. Queen f1 falls to queen takes f1, checkmate. The only other move is king g2, and then rook to f2 is also checkmate. So let's quickly review again. Okay, so we've got tension in the middle, normal French stuff. Knight takes, knight comes out, tension between the knights. Also a hanging pawn here that I failed to spot. Pawn defends knight. f6 is a typical, it's your second pawn break after c5. So c5 normally comes first, and if they take with the pawn, you are waiting to recapture with the bishop. And f6 is another really interesting one, threatening white's centre here. And if white should take, you recapture with a knight. Then you just have to move your bishop, castle, and get your rook onto the f-file. Okay, that's the general idea. So a bishop comes out with a pin on the knight, break the pin, castles, takes pawn, swap off knights, bishop retreats, and now, yeah, we're looking okay. Bishop comes out, break the pin, takes, and this I think is the turning point. Queen comes out here. Now, this is relatively early in the game to throw your queen up the board, particularly when you don't have a convincing attack. So this, and then this now. This queen is starting to look a little awkward. Okay, because I can now come here. Now pawn comes here. Now what this does is it actually traps the queen onto the h-file. Because now the queen can't go there because its own piece is on there, and can't come to here because of the bishop, and can't come there, can't come there. So this move here, although it's understandable, is ill-conceived because it reduces the queen's options to just one square. Okay, so now bishop there, force the queen back, and white has created this, right? White has opened the door for me then to play this move and then this move, right? This is a reasonable response, and then checkmate in 22 moves. Okay, so yeah, I think just in terms of principles, throwing the queen up the board before completing development, and throwing that pawn up as well. I think at this point, there's no reason to bring the queen out just yet. I mean, let's develop the knight, let's centralize the rooks, finish development before you start an attack. This is very important. But this, and then h6 reduces the queen's options maybe a little bit, but this move is not good. Right, this is a big pawn break. And And yes, pawn breaks in the middle game are one of your key tools that you need in the middle game, right? To me, the way I'm thinking about it is the opening, your default is develop, get your pieces out into the board. White has not done this. White has left his knight and this rook in the box, okay? So white is playing with half an army. And then in the middle game, once you have completed development, which white hasn't, then your ideas are improve your pieces and start to build up to an attack. Again, these two pieces, it's not even a case of improving. They haven't even joined. They haven't even entered the fray. Okay, and then pawn breaks can then change the terrain, shake things up, and that is really your very often you can attack with pawns. You can break up the playing field with pawn breaks, or you can attack with pieces. Okay, or you can some combination of the two. But I think this one's a premature pawn break, and plus a very serious problem that it's blocked off this queen's escape route. So there you go. And then I think realizing that there was a checkmate on here, which is more pressing and more forcing than any ideas about winning the rook here or losing the rook here. I'm very satisfied with that idea. Because now it's like, yeah, you're attacking my rook, so what? I'm attacking your king, you know? That's the difference. And then quick mate. So there you go. That is how to beat a 1300 player using the French defense. So yeah, 1300's fairly solid play. I mean, I'm currently in the 13 to 1400 bracket right now myself after a big slide, you know? So you should expect relatively solid play. And you should expect sometimes for them to maybe launch a premature attack. That might be one thing to look out for. Sometimes neglect to complete development, perhaps as well, as we've seen in this case. So there you go. That's how to beat a 1300 using the French defense. Let me know if you would like to see videos arranged in those 100 rating brackets, because I think that would be really very useful for helping people to climb steadily up the ratings. But let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe. See you later.